This is Jerod Lakefield, a novel by Don Fensler, Part 47. Next. "I will not make it," he said. Jerod Lakefield said. "You will know what to do," Jerod said, continuing. He didn't seem to be in any pain or distress at all. "And Timothy will tell you everything." Timothy? I started to say something stupid like, "Don't be silly, you're going to make it." But I didn't say anything. I just continued to look at Jerod and said, "I'll be with you, Jerod, whatever you want." I had forgotten all about Jennifer. I had forgotten about everything. Then Jennifer was at my side and we hugged and hugged. The tears started to flow like they would never end. And then we were back with Jerod Lakefield as he lay dying. His heart, body, and soul, we were with Jerod. But something felt wrong. Of course, he had been shot and that was wrong, but something much bigger, something felt wrong. 4 others had been hit, all of them now dead or dying. They had all been sitting in the seats where Jennifer and I and 2 other Clapper Player employees usually sat. They were all strangers to me. The shooter, whoever he was, wherever he was, had been horrifyingly accurate. All, including Jerod, were, as I said, dead or dying. Many in the crowd had been trampled, pushed, or squished in the panic, though none fatally. The shooter had apparently shot 5 times and disappeared in the craziness that followed. Now Jennifer and I were in the ambulance with Jerod Lakefield, another man who had been injured, who appeared to be already dead, and 2 ambulance attendants were with us. The attendants were working feverishly, trying to get IVs hooked into Jerod and the other man. I felt horrible for thinking this, but Jerod Lakefield seemed so human now, so small and human, so frail, weak, and mortal, so like me. The blood had drained from his face. He looked so much like a corpse. His eyes, always so alive, had gone dead. I suddenly and unexpectedly felt an intense despair, a disappointment in Jerod Lakefield himself. I felt weirdly and inappropriately disappointed, so disappointed in Jerod, so disappointed in life. I felt disappointed in myself and my life. I felt so disappointed in myself for thinking about myself at this time. But here I was, realizing that everything I was dependent on Jerod Lakefield, the greatest basketball player who ever lived, and to me, a sacred being who now had a bullet through his chest and was obviously dying. And what about what had happened in the apartment last night? Was that just a dream? Soon I would be nothing again. I can't believe the callousness of me thinking of stupid things like this popping into my head. Obviously something had drained from me also, just the way the blood had drained from Jerod Lakefield. Jennifer. Soon, how stupid of me now, and how stupid of me to ever believe that there was anything grand or precious about life. All of it, obviously, something had drained from me also, as I said. "Jennifer," I said, "my voice is dead as the grave. It's all over." But what about what happened in Jerod Lakefield apartment last night again? Wasn't that something grand and precious? No. At this moment I was filled with so much despair. I felt only depression as I stared down at Jerod Lakefield's motionless body. Was he already dead? Last night was noise and lights and darkness, which at the time makes you feel transcendent. The next morning comes with the daily grind, the ennui, the boredom, the pointlessness of life, the utterly pointlessness of basketball and life itself and your own soul, and your spirit weighs a ton, and you want to throw it off, but you can't, so you drag it in your weary car. It goes up the craggy hill for no fucking discernible fucking purpose. Again, it was like these thoughts suddenly jumped on me like they were dropped like a fucking 500-pound bricks. What were these sudden these depressing, sad thoughts coming from? I looked down at Jerod, the great Jerod Lakefield, and I felt almost disgust. His eyes were closed, but his eyelashes fluttered from time to time. We were now stuck in downtown San Diego traffic. There seemed to be an accident or disturbance up ahead of us. The paramedic looked at me and said, "I don't think he's going to make it to the hospital." He had the IV hooked up and turned back to check, probably just for something to do. The driver had the siren going and was honking the horn, but we were stuck in traffic, dead stuck. "Jerod told us last night that something was going to happen," I whispered through the street noise and ambulance siren, staring blankly at Jerod. The paramedic looked at me, then looked away. There were dozens of police car lights flashing all around us, adding to the dreamlike atmosphere of the scene. For the first time, I noticed that there were just Jennifer and I, the ambulance driver, and one paramedic and another injured man whose face we had not seen in the ambulance. Why were Jennifer and I in the ambulance and not more medical staff? And why had someone shot Jerod Lakefield? Again, I snapped back and thought what an unexpected, crappy ending to Jerod Lakefield's life this was. Here lay the man I loved most on earth, and he was dying, and for some reason, I hated him. What was I to do now? The stupidity and pointlessness of my life stared at me right in the face. And if it was just me, it would be okay. But there was Jennifer, the woman I loved most on the woman I loved most on this earth. I dragged her into this fucking mess. But shouldn't we be happy to have been part of Jerod Lakefield's brief basketball career that lasted just over a year, but would be remembered for 100 years? But wouldn't his career mainly now just be remembered for the way it ended? The shooting. I looked down at Jerod. His breath was shallow. The ambulance had hardly moved a block in the past 5 minutes. Jerod's eyelids fluttered. I reached down to touch his brow, and the world exploded into light. A searing, blinding light like 1,000 suns which had collided at a single point in space. I could see nothing, but I could hear the paramedic and driver screaming. Had we been in an accident? If only the light would fade and I could see something. And then just as quickly as I had been blinded by the light, the world went dark. There was total silence. Then the light came back on, and the screaming of the men in the ambulance started again. I knew that this was not a traffic accident. I knew now that this was not a traffic accident. The light and screaming continued for 15 or 20 seconds. I, of course, really had no sense of time right now. And then the total darkness and total silence came back. I had no idea where I was, as I could not see my hands in front of my face. Then the lights, the blinding fiery lights. It had no warmth, but the screaming started again. Then it was dark and silence, then light and deafening, then dark and silent. Light with the screaming, then darkness and silence like death, the smell of earth, an unbelievable heaviness. God, make it stop.